Well, on today's episode, Benny, we're going to rip right into the RLPA and the NRL dispute. The gloves are off, brother. We're also going to have a chat about the Panthers and some of their signings. I share a bit of a story about, the early parts of my journey to, health and well-being. It's going to be a good episode, and we digress and tell a few stories. And there's a couple of questions there at the end, so hang around and enjoy. Hello and welcome to The Medicine. With Girds and Te'o. It's great to be back. Just like to say hello to Dan and Prue, of course. Like the whole team's in here today. They open their house up to us every weekend, early in the morning. There's always tea provided. It's a beautiful environment, so very grateful, guys. Thought I'd start the show a little bit differently this week, Benny.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of feedback over the last couple of weeks about some of the things that we've been discussing, laid some foundations around well-being, and one of the tools that I use, and we're going to talk about some tools throughout the show, but one of the things that I use in different times, and I know like around decision making or anger management, which is really probably important for you. And decision-making, Dan, so when Prue comes, with you with those scissors in the next couple of weeks, you can maybe use this technique. It actually stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. It's flight or fight, mate, and you need to run, brother. And so basically assisted breathing technique that you use by inhaling through the nose and then holding and then exhaling out of the mouth, but blowing it out, then emptying the belly. So it's something like this. Like really expanding the chest, and then letting it all out. But then and then pushing through the belly and the abdominals at the end of it, just to make sure there's absolutely no air in there. Then there's like a slight hold at the end of it, at the end of the breath, the exhale, and then you do it again. And it's like you just do 3 of those.
Okay.
And it's really good just for calming and relaxing and recentering. So we'll try that. Everyone in for that? You in for that, Dan?
Yep.
No, come on, mate. I need a little bit more enthusiasm than that.
I'm ready.
Are
Yeah,
you
let's
in?
do it.
All right. On 3, 2, 1. Holding and then just letting it all out. And then just holding on the emptiness at the bottom of the breath. And then starting again. Inhale. Holding and then exhaling. It just alkalines the body. Gets rid of the acidity. And then just sit in that breath hold at the end there for a little bit. The emptiness of that. And then just go back to regular breathing. There's a really good book out there on breathing. It was probably one of the first things that I ever went to when I started sort of becoming more aware of my sort of health and well-being. And it's a book, and we'll put it in the show notes, by a guy called James Nestor, and it's called Breathe. It's incredible. It's really important. And a lot of people out there have sort of been asking over the last couple of weeks, how have I started my journey? And look, I don't sit at home all week in the lotus position meditating, mate. It's not the reality of my world,
I thought that's all you do up there.
It'd be nice. But no, but I was like, most other guys, that just know that they need change, know that they need to initiate some sort of change in their life to be, better fathers and husbands and better for their community, but didn't know what to do. And that's when, my wife started having a real influence and looking at different options. And she, the first meditation course I went to, I was kicking and screaming. I'm not going to that. I don't need meditation. That's not for me. And I did a 2-day course, and that started my journey. So yeah, that's kind of normal for the masculine. I don't know how you feel about those sorts of things, but I think the conversations around how we actually begin the process, I think, is really important.
I think breathing's always been a big part of sport, I think. I think some of the elite sides do it well. That 3 breath that we just did, that little routine, that's something that the All Blacks have done for a long time.
Yep.
And they used to gather in the middle of the field once, they had scored a try and do the breaths as a team. And it sort of went throughout the game in rugby union, especially throughout Europe. You almost saw every team doing it.
Yeah.
A lot of NRL teams are doing it now. It's about just coming back together and calming yourself for the next play. my time at South Sydney when we won a premiership, we meditated as a team.
Is that right?
Probably 3 times a week. Yeah, 3 times a week we would do it. So we would all lay down in a room and close our eyes, and it was something that it's like a muscle, isn't it? It's a muscle in terms of you got to continue to do it.
Yeah.
You know, so you can get to that point where you're just still and there is nothing buzzing around in the head.
Yeah.
I think probably I haven't done enough of it recently, so there'd be a lot floating around in the head.
Yeah.
But the better you get at it.
But it's like anything, you know. It's like you can't do one gym session and expect to be, you know, a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
It's the work. And the first couple of months, you know, the work is really tough because there's a lot of noise. And sitting in that is part of the journey, and that's the battle, right? And the rewards, I think, then are what, you know, with any sort of modality or any sort of consistent practice, the rewards are, you know, how you feel the outcomes of what you've been doing, you know. And I think anyone that does practice meditation understands that. It's a really important part of their probably daily life. And so, yeah, you're right. It's not that simple, but it's just worth the effort.
Yeah. Well, today was a start. It was good.
We started, yeah.
Yeah.
How was your week anyway? I mean, last week you're obviously pretty busy with kids' parties and that. Has this week been much different?
Well, you spoke about a couple of things. I think one of the things is important to accept when you've made a little bit of an error. You asked me at the start of the show last week what I've been up to. I said I've been flat out busy organising kids' parties. My son Rudy, his 3rd birthday. That was actually a lie. It was actually a lie. I really wasn't doing too much. I was just there because I was listening to the podcast, reviewing it with my partner, Connie, and we got to the part where I said, you know, I've been flat out this week, you know, doing kids' parties, organising, and she just looked at me like with this death stare, like, you're a liar. And I just said to her, look, I was put on the spot. I had to come up with something, and maybe I over-exaggerated my role in organising the parties. But yeah, it's been a good week.
Yeah,
you know?
What have you been doing?
No games this week for my team, so I've been pretty flat out with the NRL team, helping them prepare for the Bulldogs game. And apart from that, I suppose just listening to some of the noise going around at the moment with this RLPA stuff and watching from afar and not being too comfortable with how it's played out. So,
it's been one of those situations where there's a lot of what I've found really interesting with this whole RLPA situation is the fact that there's a lot of non-invested parties out there that seem to be getting really angry.
Yeah.
And I'm really not sure why.
Yeah.
Why all the vitriol towards the RLPA? I mean, the way that I see it, there's 2 parties just trying to get a job done. And, you know, it just seems like there's a lot of people out there with agendas throwing a lot of mud at the RLPA and their CEO, Clint Newton. How have you seen it?
The problem at the moment is, you know, we know that there's a big machine, right? There's a big media corporate machine at the moment, and they've got their guys coming hard at Clint Newton.
Yeah.
Right. But the thing they get wrong, some of those guys on those shows, is they think that they're the voice for the people. They're not the voice for the people at all. A lot of these guys on the media at the moment, right, they haven't done their research, right? So when you haven't done your research and you're not informed, the only thing when you're in a battle is to go back to is get personal, right? You know, so when they got Clint Newton on that show, he said, I'll come on the show as long as we're there face to face. I'm not doing a phone call. We'll go face to face so I can see you guys and look you in the eye, right? And straight away, the things are you the man for the job and why can't you get it done, all that. Not about the facts.
That's not the issue.
No one wants to get into the actual issues, right? Because they know they're valid points.
Yeah.
Right? So when he went in there and Gordy hit him with the, you know, I was there in 2003, we didn't get anything done, couldn't come back at him, right? It was crickets. They were quiet, right? Then they went back to personal with him. So they couldn't handle him face to face, right? And I thought he was so brave to go in there and take them on like that. He walked away. He looked great, right? But then to let him go away and they went to ground for a couple of days and then to come back, right? Like a crew of hyenas, right, on that show. And the way that it came across, I watched that show. And it didn't sit well with me, I think, about those personal attacks.
Yeah.
You know, on Clint. Like, I mean, you know, one of the things that, I mean, some of the things they said about him, he said, I think the best thing they could do with the gaffer tape is wrap it around Clint Newton's mouth, and he's not allowed to talk publicly anymore. Because whenever he does open his mouth, he only embarrasses himself. All right? Then he went on to say, unfortunately, he swallowed a corporate management handbook a number of years ago, followed by a thesaurus. Then he disappeared up his own ass. What are we talking about here? Are we
Well,
do you have anything constructive to, you know, say? Do you have any valid points about going back at the RLPA about what they're after, or is this just a personal thing now?
I've been in industrial relations disputes before with leases and stuff with business. And yeah, the interesting thing is, like, the noise now coming out of the NRL is that Clint Newton needs to remove himself from any sort of discussions. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because the NRL might have the resources to remove Andrew Abdo, and then, you know, V'landys comes in and does it, or whatever. Yeah. But one, the RLPA probably don't have the resources. So what do they want? The players to step in and negotiate? Now, Clint Newton's only going to step aside if the players ask him to step aside. He, you know, it's ridiculous to think that the opposition in a dispute can then have control over who negotiates for the other party, right? It's ridiculous. And that's why you need an independent industrial relations mediator.
Yeah.
Because if you have that guy in there, and this is what it comes back to me, everyone lays everything on the table, and this guy from an independent position makes a decision.
Yeah.
What are the NRL hiding?
Absolutely.
Why won't they come back and put themselves in that situation? Why do they keep throwing it back, saying, well, we can get the job done if Clint Newton steps aside? Well, Clint's not going to step aside because the people that are paying his wage and what he's passionate about are saying, Clint, we need you to do this job for us. And the NRL know that. And why has nothing been mentioned about the NRL and the administrators at the NRL? I don't understand that. I mean, there's two sides to the story, right?
Yeah.
And so all the heat is always coming for the players and the RLPA. And if you think, you know, we've had a media ban, and I know that directly impacts obviously the broadcasters and those guys that are feeling like they need to attack it's probably affecting their day-to-day role because they don't have access to certain things, and I don't know, that it might be making their jobs more difficult. The players have now gone to the measure of actually covering the badge. Yeah. Now, there's a lot of the other commentary out there is that the players don't even know what they're fighting for. Now, when you think about that, right, this is a sport full of leaders. Like, you need to be a leader to play in the NRL at any level. Like, there's leaders and there's leaders at NRL level, and then you're just a leader to get there. You know what it takes, right? And so there's these guys that are actually making a conscious decision before a game to get their jersey, and girls, and put like strapping and tape over it to make a statement. Now, I don't imagine Clint getting 500, 600 people in a room and saying, guys and girls, we are going to do this. And then if they didn't agree, if they weren't really passionate about it, there's no way in the world would you get them to go through that process as part of their routine before they play a game of footy.
No. So, from my understanding is, they're so united as not only players but clubs and staff, that there's staff out there ripping up the tape, cutting it up, helping put it on the jerseys, getting the players prepared to go out there. So they are very, very united. And some of the commentary in the media is that what they're trying to do now is divide them. They're trying to divide them, saying, well, I'm still talking to a few players in this, but they can't come up with any names, right? They're just trying to divide them. But the other part too is, I think it was really brave, right, of the Titans girls that played down there. They were the first team that were going to run out there, remember? So everyone come up with the idea, we're going to put the tape on, all right? And those girls at the Titans, they got told from their club not to do it, right? And they were the first ones out there. And they're a bunch of girls. They usually range in the ages of 19 to 23, all right?
Brave.
They took the first carry. Yeah. They took the first carry off the kickoff, right? And I think that was brave of them. And now, if it's important to those girls, those NRLW girls, right, there must be something in it, right?
Yeah. You know what else is redundant, and it always comes up during these negotiations, how they get compared, and take nothing away from, school teachers and nurses and the people, the pillars of our society. Take nothing away from those guys.
Yeah.
But the conversation needs to be redundant about, these guys just can't relate to normal people. No, they can't. It's a billion-dollar industry, right? And they're probably in the top 0.5% of people in their industry. And you speak to anyone out there, anyone that's been involved in the game at any level, and they'll tell you that these guys deserve everything they get.
Everything. Because
the dedication, the hard work, the sacrifice, whatever it may be, you've been there.
Yeah.
The game's bringing in, billions of dollars per year.
Yeah.
It's in better shape than it's ever been, and the players need to be rewarded. What's the problem with that?
Yeah. Well, I'm lucky I've played all around the world. I've played both codes in both hemispheres, right? Rugby league is the toughest game of all, right? And it's got the best athletes. And as you said, to get yourself from the under-12s all the way to the NRL, fight all the processes and beat all the competition, get to that position through injury, right? And then you get your big contracts, like, you deserve it.
Yeah.
People talk about Payne Haas at the moment, right, as this guy he's not worth that much money. I can tell you he's worth that much money. He's worth more, right? There's players over in England, right, that make more money than Payne Haas that are nowhere near as talented as him, right? We just down this fishbowl and we think that he should just take what he gets and
be grateful, be happy for it.
He is one of one. I've said it before. Yeah. He's one of one. You go around the world and try and find another Payne Haas. They're not out there. All right, so why don't we pay these guys? We want them in our game.
Yeah.
We don't want them in another game. We want them here.
And you also need to think about some of the people that, getting involved in those conversations are probably, in the top 5 or 10% of their industry, giving them the platform. And how much are they earning? From, again, the game.
Yeah.
That provides. So I don't see any resolution close at hand at this point. I think this is going to be an ongoing thing. And I think that the players also need some support, but I also feel like some pressure at some point needs to be pushed across the table to the NRL, and they need to get back to the table, and they need to be happy with an independent industrial relations mediator to get this thing done.
Yeah, and Volandi's got to step up and get that done, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, we keep talking about Clint, but hey, you're the deal maker. Right, I haven't heard from him much. I just hope that if there is going to be some more debate, I'd love it to be some more face-to-face stuff. I think Clint's pretty prepared and ready to come on and chat to anyone. He's got nothing to hide. He wants to get in front of them and go for it. But seems to me like there's parts of the media that are probably happy to not face him, and when he's not there. Well, for me, like I said, that NRL 360 for me was uncomfortable viewing. It just looked to me like a bunch of guys around there, bunch of bullies, to be honest. That's the way it came across to me. And I just didn't feel that they had that same energy when he was standing right in front of them. Right, so it says a little bit about them.
Well, we work, working in the industry that we do, we've got producers, and when this all broke a couple of weeks ago, the first thing they do is they contact us all and they say, boys, who do you want to talk to? And it's like, well, can we get something from the RLPA? And they've got guys like Tommy Simons and Jamie Brewer doing a fantastic job as well. Yeah. Tommy came on our show.
Yeah, he was great.
And was great. But we also said, can we speak to someone from the NRL? Crickets. Nothing. Why not?
Yeah.
Why aren't they putting themselves in a position to defend their position or just make us understand their position? It's just been silence. So for me, when you've got, two parties like that, and you've got one that's willing just to lay it all out there, being really upfront and honest and transparent, and someone that's ducking and weaving, well, I tend to sit on the side of the person that's willing to show their cards. Well, there's been some other news this week. Penrith getting some good business done. Liam Martin signing on. I think they're close with Dylan Edwards. But obviously after you win 2 comps and you've been at the top of the tree for a long period of time, and we've seen the amount of people that have left the club over the last couple of years. The one guy that they haven't locked up at this point is Jerome Luai, polarising character. One of those guys that people love to hate, but the group, the guys that he plays with, they love him. Is he a guy that, firstly, let's talk about the order in why they signed those guys in that particular order, and then we'll go to Jerome Luai and being a coach. Is he a guy that you'd like to have in your roster?
Oh, absolutely. You know, he's a premiership winner. He's played Origin. I agree exactly what you said. If he's in your team, you love him.
Yeah.
Right. If he's not in your team, you probably don't like him. So it would be an interesting scenario for him to leave that club, because I feel like he's quite comfortable there. You know, that's his crew. He's come through the juniors with. He's very comfortable. But look, realistically, someone's going to get squeezed out. All right. And you talk about the order of who they've signed. All right, they've made some pretty good decisions there. You know, a few years ago, they've locked up Cleary, they've locked up Yeo, they locked up Brian To'o, they've locked up Martin, right? And they're putting all these pieces together, right? And they're probably, the decision that they're going to make depends on a couple of things. All right, one is who's the most important to your team, and obviously who you can go without, but also what's coming. So we're not really privy to what's coming underneath these players in terms of your juniors. So if you've got a really good...
Katoa's not there anymore.
Yeah, well, Katoa's one of the insurance...
You were aware of what's coming through the juniors, weren't you?
Dolphins were aware of Isaiah Katoa was coming through, but I'm sure there's plenty more. Yeah. So you got a young 5'8" coming through. He's 17 years old now, turning 18. You're seeing the potential there. That's why... you could be thinking, all right, we get one more year out of Jerome, and then we're going to transition this kid in. You might be looking back and looking at back rowers and thinking, we got nothing down here that looks like Liam Martin. So that's why they make these decisions. All right. And it's just like when you go back to Melbourne Storm, let's remember that they had Greg Inglis, Billy Slater, Cooper Cronk, and Cam Smith. One had to go. Right, yeah. They made a choice of which one they think they could operate without. It was Greg Inglis. See you later.
You've also got Nathan in 7.
Yeah.
And it just seems to me like at the moment, you can fabricate 6s.
Yes.
You can't fabricate 7s,
no.
Right? So they've ticked that box. And then you've got a guy like Jerome. So does that limit some of the clubs out there? Like there's a lot of talk that the Bulldogs would be interested. But I look at Burton and Luai.
Same.
In 6 and 7, I'm like, it's same. I don't think the Bulldogs are an option for him. What sort of clubs out there do you think that, you know, he would fit well into? Not just from a playing perspective, but from a cultural perspective, like someone that's going to embrace the personality that he has. Or do you think anyone would embrace?
Manly Seagulls.
You think Manly?
Manly. You know, because you've got a halfback there. Right, and now you can find your running 5'8". There's one team that just springs to mind.
What about a Canberra?
Yeah,
Fogarty,
absolutely,
and Luai.
Fogarty and Luai, yeah, because you're losing.
You're replacing Jack Whiten.
Losing Jack Whiten, yeah. So absolutely, you know, you just look for those little combinations, and you know, like you talk culturally about it, and you know, look at some. Let's just say Manly. There's a lot of Polynesian players. He'd fit in well. And you look at Canberra and Sticky and you think, oh, that might not work. It might.
It might work.
Wait till you get down there. Wait till you sit down together.
Look at Ivan.
Yeah.
He's a pretty conservative guy.
Mate, I'm just saying, like, sometimes you just don't know until you get there. But it could really work. But, you know, I think Penrith have made those really smart decisions. And with their junior base, right, they can just plug those holes. They're going to keep losing players. They keep plugging holes. Right, Tago come out of nowhere. Right, Taylor May, Taruva. Right, they're just coming through. There's a couple more coming through.
They're strong in those areas, aren't they? Outside backs.
I wonder. Outside backs.
You know, they're going to pay. I think a guy like Dylan Edwards. I mean, what an investment he's been. Like he's been on $400,000 or $500,000 for a long period of time. Like insane, right? Now he's going to get the pay that he's finally deserved.
Yeah.
An important part of their club, and I think he was a really good investment for him.
You just can't lose him, right? I just don't think there's anyone in the game that does all the small things like he does. You know, he's a competitor. He's everywhere. from what I hear, his endurance base is through the roof.
Yeah, fittest guy in the club.
Fittest guy in the club.
Yep.
You could almost say the fittest guy in the comp. Right, just chasing everything, covering kicks, covering tries, right, and you can't afford to lose that effort, right? So I think he was someone that they definitely had to lock down, otherwise someone else was coming to do it.
Yep.
News Corp reporting 950K a season until 2029.
So that's
29.
That's for Dylan Edwards, right?
Dylan Edwards.
For Dylan
How
Edwards.
old is he now?
27.
Yeah, I'll confirm.
So what's that? Wow. It's a long deal. It's 6 years. 6-year deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's 27.
But he could have got more.
6-year deal.
But he could have got more. You can get more elsewhere.
You
for
reckon
that.
he's going to get more than 950 somewhere else?
Oh, yeah.
Where?
There's plenty of teams that would offer
Yeah?
1.1, 1.2 for Dylan Edwards.
but
But
you-
what I'm saying, he gets to win competitions.
But you need to understand as well, like what's happened to some of the guys that they've taken out of that system. Like have a look at Matty Burton. You know, and it happens to everyone. I mean, look at Sean. You know,
Yeah.
Sullivan. Like, so there's guys that come out of that system. I mean, it really helps being around a roster like that. It's great for your game. It's great for your bank balance.
Yeah.
It's great for your trophy cabinet.
Yep.
But then you all of a sudden you come out of that system and things change.
Yeah, they do. Because, you know, you need good players around you to perform at your best. And, I mean, NRL history just shows so many players have left for big money, right, and gone to a struggling team to try and reinvent them. And it just doesn't work.
What about you, the back end of your careers? You got any? I mean, was there a big carrot that you couldn't refuse at some point? Did you stay at a club for less? I mean, that's been the Broncos' mantra, hasn't it, always?
Yeah,
That's how they avoided the salary cap for like 30 years. Oh, yeah, we all stay for less. Is that true?
Well, when I was at the Broncos, you know, I had a couple of injuries there towards the back end. I think this is around 2011, 2012. And actually, they wanted me to take a little bit of a pay cut. And at that stage, I wasn't willing to do that. And so, yeah, my manager looked around and he come back to me with a deal from South Sydney. And I said, yeah, let's be honest, South Sydney back then, it wasn't the South Sydney that they are now. South Sydney, he said, mate, they're going to offer you the most money. I think you should take it. And I'll be honest with you, my reaction was, oh, South Sydney shit. Like, you know what I mean? I'm just going to go down there, lose. And he said, no, Benny, I'm telling you, they're turning things around. They've got a great coach, you know, Sam Burgess, Greg Inglis, all these guys. And I started thinking about it. And because, you know, there was a joke, a running joke, you know, when I was at the Broncos that, you know, we had a gym trainer at the time, and whenever anyone wanted to take a little bit of a shortcut, he'd say, hey, listen, boys, this ain't South Sydney. So there was this thing in me that used to think
Programmed.
that wasn't a good club to go to. But obviously they were making changes and they had offered me the most money. So I took that deal and I went down to Sydney. Well, end up winning a competition.
Just a bonus.
And had 2 years of great footy, walked into a system with a great coach, a great club, guys that were at their peak and ready to win, you know, and everything sort of just worked out. So, you know, sometimes, you know, you think you're just going somewhere probably for a little bit of money, right? And it works out. And I know you had something similar.
Yeah, mine was a little similar. Yeah, it was actually my last contract, and it was just on the back of the 2000 final series and the World Cup come back, and I was off contract, and Penrith wanted to do a long-term deal, a 4-year deal, which would have taken me to like 33. And I remember sitting with my manager at the time and thinking, well, we haven't had really any success. I think I played like 2 final series my whole career. And being an outside back, you really depended on people around you, right? So it was hard work. And I'm not sure, you know, we always had good junior base, but I'm not sure the pathways certainly weren't then what they are now. But there was awareness there from us that, you know, there were some guys coming into the system like the Luke Lewises, the Luke Rooneys, the Trent Waterhouses, the Shane Rodneys, those guys. So I had sort of one eye on that. And then, there was some big suitors that came in and offered me probably not as much money, but opportunity to be successful. But I felt really connected to the club and the community out there, and I'd been there at that point for 10 years. So I had to really sit in that and say, okay, so what do I want to do? You know, how important is winning a comp?
Yeah.
And having that success and playing in finals. And if I'm to sacrifice that, because I honestly didn't think that Penrith were going to, win a comp and probably play a lot of finals footy when I was negotiating. What's that going to cost? And it's going to cost the club something. So yeah, I was really open with the dialogue that we had around that. They didn't believe it. They said, no, I think there's going to be success, and we've got this. And so that was the negotiation. But yeah, I made them pay more on the back of me staying there for what I thought was going to be an unsuccessful period, and we won the comp.
So you take the cash and you stay comfortable at Penrith, and ends up working out.
But my intentions were good, and that was important.
Well, we've seen so many players, right, leaving clubs and going to clubs where they think they're going to get a premiership, right? And it's that thought that sometimes you chase things so hard that you just can't get it.
Yeah.
And we've seen players, go to the Storm and go to the Roosters and it just seems to just get away from them all the time. And compared to some boys that just take the best situation for them, and sometimes it can come. And, look, when I left the Broncos and went to South Sydney, never in my dreams did I think that I was
going to win a comp.
Oh, no way.
Really?
No way.
Okay. So what did you sign, a 2-year deal?
I signed a 2-year deal.
Why 2 years? Was it always just going to be a springboard to something better in your mind?
Yeah, for me, it was either going to be, a springboard to maybe another contract, potentially somewhere else, or there was always a thought process about rugby union. So I never wanted to lock in for more than 2 years. Yeah. But like I said, it was if I had all the contracts lined up, South Sydney was the one that was going to pay me the most.
Yeah.
So that was why I didn't take it for any really other reason. But, as it worked out. And one of the other parts too was I did meet with Michael Maguire.
Yeah.
And he promised me that I would start every week and that I'd play 80 minutes.
And had you been coming off the bench at the Broncos?
Yeah, I'd been starting bench. I was fighting for minutes.
How old were you at the time?
I was 20. I was 25. Okay. So at the time, I was at the Broncos, and we had Sam Thaiday, Alex Glenn, Matt Gillette, and myself, and we were just fighting over minutes. Like none of us could really, get
nail down the spot
and what we wanted. So I think there was just too many, and that's why one had to go, and that was me. And I'm pretty happy that was me.
Worked out okay, didn't it? Got some questions for us, Dan?
We certainly do. Certainly do, boys.
Have you engaged the community? What's been going on over on that side of the business?
Mate, there's been a ton of questions come in, but we can only get through so many. But
Yep.
please keep sending them through on the Instagram, Facebook group, all those good places.
Because at some point, if we get enough questions, we can drop an extra episode through the week. Just having a chat with community, which would be great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the first one, we've got a couple similar from Jay Noons and Mitch Dans.
Okay.
So boys, tips to help getting out of a slump, and where do I start? How do I know what I should do first?
Well, in a slump, I'd imagine, personally, we go through some pretty difficult times. So for me, I'll start that. There's so many different ways. But the first thing I sort of looked at, and one of the easiest things to get started with on the journey, is diet. Like just simplifying things around diet, just an awareness around what you're eating, what you're putting in your body, how it's making you feel, getting some routine around your diet. So, water intake, what sort of oils that you're using or not using, like sunflower, canola oils, getting that sort of stuff out of your diet, limiting your dairy intake, just making better decisions around that. And then for me, it was also whole foods. So whole foods generally is, when you move away from using, packets of food. And so going to local markets and buying fresh produce, and then actually making sauces and making things from the get-go. So diet has been probably the first part of my journey was all about diet, because I end up I've got some stories. Man, I tell you. Have we got time?
Yeah.
Have we got time?
Yep.
I've got to tell you this one story. When I first opened the cafes, I was just in on the tools, like making coffee all the time, and there was this Russian clairvoyant lady, right? And she scared the shit out of me. When people just come in and look at you, and that they're doing something like they're looking through you or at you in a different way. It wasn't sexual or anything, but she was just like looking at me, right?
Yeah.
And so she did it, and she'd come in every day, and she'd order, and she'd look at me, and I'd be making coffee, and she'd be looking at me, and I'm like, oh my God, this has got to end. And then one day she came over to me, and she started telling me a story, and she said, I'm from Russia, I'm a clairvoyant, and I need to read you. I want to do a reading on you. And I said, oh, that's fine. I'm honoured, but it's just not my thing, but that's all good. You're a great customer, and we'll just continue on with our nice little relationship the way that it is, thank you. And anyway, she kept on coming. Then my wife was working in the cafe at the time, and she kept on going to my wife, who's a little bit more open to those things back at that time. And she said to my wife, I've got to do a reading on your husband, but I can't do it until he gives me permission. So my wife started planting some seeds. Oh, maybe you did. So one day I just said, look, that's okay. Just tell her to go and do a reading. So anyway, she came back I didn't see her for about 3 weeks, and then she comes back, and so she goes to my wife, can you tell him I need to sit down and go through this reading with him? It was like 3 pages. I'm like, oh, here we go. All right. So I sit down, and the first thing that she said to me was, and I was 40 at the time, do you have life insurance? Was the opening line.
Really?
And I didn't.
Yeah.
But I'd had, the business. I just started back in radio. I had 2 young kids under 3. I was in it, mate. I was going hard, right? I was drinking probably 6 or 7 long blacks a day. Like I was eating a croissant because that was just all in front of me. I was eating a muffin. Like I was in it, and I didn't care about me. I was the last person that I could think about. I didn't know what I needed to actually deliver all the goodness that I needed to at that point of my life. So I was just getting through, and that was the opening statement. And I said, no, I don't. And she said, if you don't change your path, you're not going to make it past 46. How old are you? And I said, I'm 40. That was the second line.
Wow.
So my wife just fell back in the chair. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, well, I'll make some changes and whatever. So on the back, it went on. There was 3 pages of documentation, and she was so on point with, my past, not knowing anything about me or whatever. I thought, okay, well, I got to take this thing seriously, right? So that was the catalyst for me for change. So then I went and got a lot of tests done, like blood levels. I had fatty liver. I had a thing called Barrett's syndrome, which was in the esophagus. It was inflammation based on all the anti-inflammatories and that we'd taken.
Really?
And drinking lots of coffee and alcohol. Yeah. And that essentially long-term was going to be a carcinogenic. So I had to get rid of that. So how did I do that? So then it was the deep dive into, okay, this is what I need to do now, make these wholesale changes. And I started by diet, by just an awareness of diet and what I was actually putting into my body, and just forming. People think routine is about exercise or different modalities. Routine can actually be a lot about diet, forming some really good habits and having an awareness about those parts of your life that are really important.
No, that's great. That's amazing. Russian clairvoyant. There you go.
Yeah. Interesting lady.
Yeah.
Interesting lady. It goes further because, I got that. And about 3, and I was starting to make some minor changes, but I just wasn't in a position to make wholesale changes at that point with everything going on. So this one day I woke up about 3 years later, and my heart rate was resting at about 220. And so my wife, and this is what actually got me off coffee. And then my wife threw me in the car, and I rang my old Penrith doctor, and he said, and I told him my resting heart rate was it was like fluttering. It was like that, and then it would stop for 3 or 4 seconds, then go again. So he said, I'll get out here. So I went out, and he put me in emergency, tried to slow it down. And he said, on the way out there, he said to my wife, don't let him go to sleep. Don't let him rest because he's in a pretty dangerous state. And it was an hour and a half drive to get out there. And then they put me in emergency and tried to get my heart rate down through different medication. We're about to get the paddles onto me to realign my heart rate. And it was funny. And at that point, I was so exhausted, I'm laying in emergency and there was no one around me. And I was just kind of about to let go. I'd had enough. And I was off. And then my wife and my 3-year-old daughter came in and they grabbed me. And I think they pulled me back, and I don't know where I was going at
Yeah.
that point. But I was off to a different place.
Do you think you had just been living so unhealthy in terms of you were just working, there was no balance, right? So just to keep you up all the time, you were calling radio. And sometimes, you need a coffee to get up.
That's
you feel
right.
like you need energy. You're in the coffee shop, feeling a bit low, coffee, and you're just always up,
Sugar,
up.
coffee. That's
Yeah.
what I was living on. That's what I was surviving on.
Yeah.
Just hit those highs. So I had to find another way to, to level out, but still have those. I still wanted to feel up and about, especially when you're on air and, you're at work and stuff. So that was important, but I needed to find another way to do it. And I did that with changing like my diet, getting sort of regular exercise in there, bringing routines into, my life.
You don't drink coffee?
I haven't had a coffee in, I think, 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 6 or 7 years. And you know what I realised? It wasn't actually, I loved coffee. I was around it. I was roasting it, going from one cat, always sampling it, always talking about it. Everyone's coming in having coffee with me because I'm the coffee guy in the coffee shop, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't so much the coffee that I missed. It was the ritual. It was the ceremony around sitting down with people and breaking bread.
Yeah.
And having those moments. So then it was about finding something else that I could replace that with, because I didn't want to miss that.
Yeah.
That was the part that I really enjoyed. And I think that's what most people sort of are convinced, that it's the coffee that they actually love. But I think it's the routine or the ritual they go through, whether it's making their own one at home and sitting out on the balcony and what that represents to their day.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily coffee. Not what's in the cup.
Yeah.
It's actually that whole process and what that gives them.
What have you put in the cup now?
Chai. Yeah.
Chai.
Brewed chai.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good time to talk about our corporate partnerships, right? Well, I think it's pretty it's clear to see that we're on a certain path here and we're going to promote healthy living and lifestyle, right? So, and we've made a decision early on in the piece to not align ourselves, with betting agencies or companies that supply alcohol, which does thin the market, makes Prue's job a hell of a lot harder. Sorry about that, Prue. But yeah, we're passionate about, making people's lives better if we can, and we can do that by partnering with, people out there that have products that they believe do that.
Yeah.
And we want to try those products too, don't we?
Absolutely. Any chai teas out there?
Yeah. So chai is my thing.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your ritual? What's your diet like?
Oh, I'd probably be someone I'm living on the go a little bit. I'm probably in that same space that you were at, right? With the young kids, I've got a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 1-year-old, coaching in the morning, coaching at night, calling on the weekends, doing the show with you. I feel like probably like a lot of people on the go. So I always feel like you're trying to get an upper just to keep you going. And that's why you end up eating at service stations, right? You end up grabbing a snack there and a coffee here to keep you going. I think before you know it, you are in that unhealthy cycle. And there's been times where I've taken a break from things. I think it's important to take a break from things like coffee sometimes. I think it's important to take a break from sugar. And the massive one for me has been this thing. Take a break from it. Right? I think sometimes if you can just put it away, some days, if you just put it away and say, I won't touch it till, midday, it's a pretty pleasant morning when you're not around it, right? Because this affects a lot of your mood, right?
Yeah.
We're too easily contacted now. So sometimes I just think putting that away can really change your mindset and just spend time with the family.
Be present.
Yeah.
So I would start there, Dan. Yeah.
Lovely.
Diet.
You can cut that.
Amazing. And I guess the question will end on, so apologies if we didn't get to your questions, but please keep sending them through. If we get enough, we will definitely, in the future, look to do a second episode per week. But Drew Candle, who had the weirdest pre-game ritual?
I had my own personal one. It was weird. It was kind of lazy, but it was also weird. But when you just, it was, and fortunately back in the day, or unfortunately, whichever way you want to look at, we didn't win a lot of footy games. So you know how you get connected to process when you're winning? I was one of those guys. Like, it just has to be the same way because we won, right?
Yeah.
And I had this thing about not washing my Speedos if we won.
Oh, what?
And this one year, we went on this streak of 11 games, man. Those things were rank. They were awful. It was like get them out of the bag like this, and they were wet, and then sliding them on.
Oh, and that's why you were making so many tackle breaks. Guys, just not wanting to get their
Can we
head in.
lose, please, boys? Hey, do me a favour. Let's throw one.
880 minutes
Oh,
in the
is
same
that right?
Speedos.
Oh, mate, yeah.
Oh,
It
That's
was
wrong.
awful.
That's
I
wrong.
actually think that, after that run, I washed them and they fell apart.
I don't think I ever did anything too crazy, but you become so superstitious as an athlete, right? When you're really just looking at your performance and you're trying to figure things out. I went through a stage when I was at South Sydney where started off the season and went down to the bakery and got these rolls and cut them up, and then went to the Woolworths and got this turkey and had turkey cheese, and I made this roll and ate it, and like I said, we won, right? So the next weekend I'm down at the same bakery, I'm at the Woolworths getting the turkey. Like if they didn't have the turkey, I was freaking out.
That's
the
weird.
following weekend kept going, and before you know it, it was part of my ritual. I was turning up to these pre-game warm-up things. I had my little rolls here, my turkey rolls in a little Tupperware, and I had all the stuff. But then, you just can't, especially if you change clubs.
It's horrible, isn't it?
You just can't keep that going because, when I went to France and I'm playing rugby, I remember getting on a bus in France, an 8-hour bus ride to a game. 8-hour bus ride, and we stopped somewhere, and our pre-game meal, there was bread rolls and cornflakes.
Did you put the cornflakes on the bread roll?
No, I just had cornflakes with some sugar on it and milk and some bread rolls, and they had some little like ham or whatever, and that was it. And at the end of the day, you just got to get out there and play.
Yeah.
Right. And then once you start going through those things, you break down those barriers and you start to think a lot of it's up here, right?
All of it's up there.
All of it's up there. I just think, if you're on the move a lot, you can't go wrong with just get a sandwich and go.
They're
out and
different,
play
aren't
footy.
they? The French. I had
Oh,
a
they
mate
are.
that went over at the back end of his career, and you know how over here you have like the corporate functions, and they're generally in the club after the game, when you go and have a beer with the corporate partners or whatever, the board members and the fans or whatever it may be. Well, they used to hold their functions pre-game. So they'd play at like 3:00 on a Sunday, and they'd have their corporate functions at 12. All the players would be there, and they'd eat a buffet lunch and drink like 4 or 5 glasses of red wine.
Yeah.
And that's how they would play. Like, it was the social aspect was more important than the competitive nature of it.
Well, when I was at Toulon, and I was only there for 6 months, but I remember we'd go for a team lunch. Yeah, we'd train in the morning, and then we might go out for a team lunch, and we'd be all sitting there, and once the meals come out and everyone's eaten, and then you had a couple of sort of young academy kids, so they're around that 19, 20 age, and they all pull up on their motorbikes and their scooters and all that, and then they sit there, they got their helmets there, and the food's done, right? Then out comes the little espressos, right? Out comes the cigarettes. Cigarette, espresso, helmet on, and take off. It was just a different life over there, just carefree.
Yeah.
And they know how to just turn it on, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think they get too bogged down with the routine.
No
or maybe that is
superstitions over
their
there.
routine.
Yeah. I think their routine is there is no routine.
Yeah, I like it.
It's the best
It's
way.
a good way to live. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you got a little bit out of the show today and some of the topics we covered. And probably want to leave you today on a little message is be kind to yourself. We're in a rat race at the moment. We all have busy lives and we don't all have it figured out. So I think it's important sometimes to just slow down, take a breath, all right? And like I said, be kind to yourself.
Yeah, be present. And that's the medicine for this week, Benny. We'll be back next week. We look forward to seeing you guys then.
Absolutely. Before we actually sign off for good, thank you so much for your support during the week, guys. we're sharing your messages with the boys through our little WhatsApp group as well, and we're loving the feedback that you're supplying. So if you have anything to say, please share it, and the boys will definitely read what you're putting out there. As we said last week, the best thing that you can do for the podcast is share it with your friends and your family. Subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and leaving those 5-star reviews and a recommendation and a review. That really does help us get up those charts. So if you wanted to join the medicine community, we're most active on Instagram. We are also on Facebook and TikTok, but I think that's it for another show, boys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.